The greatest heroes in every mythology share one profound secret that modern society has forgotten entirely. They all walked alone before they walked with purpose, not because they were outcasts or misfits, but because awakening to your true calling requires a sacred separation from the collective dream that most people mistake for reality. This isn't about becoming antisocial or rejecting human connection. It's about recognizing that the hero's journey begins the moment you stop participating in the elaborate theater of unconscious living that surrounds you everywhere you look. When a soul begins to stir from the slumber of ordinary existence, something fundamental shifts in how they perceive the world around them. The conversations that once seemed meaningful reveal themselves as endless loops of complaint, status-seeking, and the desperate need for validation. The roles that everyone plays so convincingly, the successful professional, the devoted consumer, the politically correct citizen, start to feel like costumes in a play where everyone has forgotten their acting. Joseph Campbell understood this phenomenon deeply when he wrote about the hero's departure from the ordinary world, but what he perhaps didn't emphasize enough is how terrifyingly alone this initial awakening can feel. The hero doesn't choose to become different. Consciousness chooses the hero. One day you're participating fully in the social machinery that keeps everyone comfortable and distracted, and the next day you find yourself watching it all from a distance that seems to have appeared overnight. You haven't become bitter or superior. You've simply stopped finding nourishment in what feeds everyone else. The small talk feels hollow, the pursuits that drive your colleagues seem meaningless, and the entertainment that captivates millions strikes you as elaborate distraction from something far more important that you can't yet name. This is where the mythic journey truly begins, in this moment of sacred disillusionment. Campbell called it the call to adventure, but for most modern heroes, it feels more like a call to solitude. The world hasn't changed. Your eyes have. And once you begin to see the patterns, the scripts, the unconscious repetitions that govern most human interaction, you discover that authentic connection becomes both more precious and more rare. You haven't rejected people. You've simply awakened to the difference between genuine relationship and the comfortable illusions that most people call friendship. The ancient myths are filled with heroes who must leave their villages, their families, their familiar territories to discover who they really are beneath all the roles and expectations. Today's hero faces the same archetypal challenge, but the journey is primarily internal. The wilderness you must cross is not geographical but psychological, the vast space between who you thought you were and who you're becoming. Unlike all mythic journeys, this one begins with a step into the unknown, which in our connected age often means a step away from the crowd and into the profound stillness of your own authentic presence. What Campbell identified as the crossing of the threshold reveals itself in modern life as the moment when you stop performing the daily rituals of unconscious belonging. You don't announce this transition or make dramatic declarations. You simply find yourself unable to participate with the same energy in conversations that circle endlessly around nothing, in social gatherings that feel more like collective sleepwalking, in the entire complex dance of mutual validation that keeps most relationships feeling warm but fundamentally empty. This threshold crossing is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of the contemporary hero's journey. Friends and family interpret your growing stillness as withdrawal, your decreased need for constant communication as coldness, your reluctance to engage in familiar patterns as rejection of them personally. But what's really happening is far more profound. You're undergoing what Campbell called the belly of the whale experience, that crucial phase where the old self must die before the new self can be born. The solitude that emerges during this phase isn't the bitter isolation of someone who has given up on humanity. It's the sacred space where transformation occurs. Ancient myths speak of heroes spending time in caves, forests, or on mountaintops, and while few modern people have access to literal wilderness, we all have access to the inner wilderness of silence, reflection, and genuine self-encounter. This is where you meet what Campbell called your supernatural aid, not an external mentor, but the deeper wisdom that emerges when you stop filling every moment with distraction and allow yourself to hear the voice that has always been speaking beneath the noise. The quality of this solitude is entirely different from loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of disconnection from others. Sacred solitude is the joy of connection with something larger than your conditioned personality. It's in this space that you begin to understand why the hero's journey has been told and retold across every culture and every age, because it describes a transformation that is both deeply personal and universally human. You're not becoming isolated. You're becoming individuated, discovering the unique way that universal patterns want to express themselves through your particular life. People around you may not understand this transformation, and that's part of the journey too. The hero always faces what Campbell called the road of trials, and one of the greatest trials in our hyper-connected age is learning to be at peace with being misunderstood. When you're no longer seeking approval or trying to fit into others' expectations, you naturally become harder to categorize, and that makes some people uncomfortable. Your presence begins to reflect possibilities they haven't chosen, paths they haven't taken, and sometimes that reflection is unwelcome. If you felt this call to something deeper, this pull toward authentic living even when it means walking a lonelier path, know that you're not alone in this ancient journey. Share your experience in the comments below. Let's create a circle of modern mythmakers who understand that the hero's path has always required the courage to stand apart before learning to truly belong. Subscribe to join others who are navigating this timeless transformation in contemporary life. The trials that Campbell wrote about, the tests, allies, and enemies that every hero must face, reveal themselves in modern life through the complex dynamics of living authentically in an inauthentic world. The greatest enemy is not some external villain, but the constant pressure to return to unconscious living, to slip back into the comfortable roles and familiar patterns that everyone else finds so reassuring. Every social situation becomes a choice point. Will you perform the expected responses, or will you remain true to what you've discovered in your solitude? This is where the hero's journey becomes most challenging for contemporary seekers. Ancient heroes faced dragons and evil sorcerers, clear external threats that could be defeated with courage and skill. Modern heroes face something far more subtle and pervasive, the collective agreement to avoid depth, to keep things light and comfortable, to maintain the illusions that make ordinary life feel secure and meaningful. Your very presence, when you're no longer participating in these agreements, becomes disruptive to the system. The loneliness of this phase is real and deep. You haven't become arrogant or superior, but you've stopped pretending to find meaning in what no longer feeds your soul. Conversations that once seemed perfectly normal now feel like elaborate dances around the truth. The entertainment that captivates others strikes you as sophisticated distraction from the real questions of existence. Even well-meaning friends can feel like they're speaking a language you're slowly forgetting how to speak. Yet it's precisely in this apparent isolation that the most beautiful aspect of the hero's journey can unfold, what Campbell called meeting the goddess or finding the elixir. In mythic terms, this represents the hero's discovery of something so valuable that it justifies all the trials and apparent losses. For the modern hero walking the path of authentic living, this treasure is the possibility of genuine connection with others who have also chosen truth over comfort, depth over surface, real relationship over performed relationship. These connections, when they occur, are qualitatively different from what most people call friendship. They're not based on shared complaints, mutual flattery, or the comfortable exchange of familiar ideas. They emerge from mutual recognition. Two people who have each done the inner work of separating their authentic self from their conditioned personality, meeting in that rare space where pretense becomes unnecessary. Such meetings are precious precisely because they're so uncommon, and they can't be forced or manufactured through any social technique. The beauty of these authentic connections is that they require nothing beyond honest presence. There's no performance needed, no careful management of image, no subtle negotiation for approval or validation. When two people meet who have each made peace with their own solitude, who have each stopped needing others to complete them or confirm their worth, something magical becomes possible, the kind of relationship that actually nourishes rather than depletes, that supports growth rather than demanding stagnation. If you recognize yourself in this description, if you've experienced both the loneliness and the liberation of authentic living, you're walking a path that has been traveled by seekers across all cultures and all ages. Leave a comment sharing your own experience of this journey. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Subscribe to continue exploring these timeless patterns with a community of fellow travelers. The final stage of Campbell's hero's journey, the return with the elixir, takes on profound meaning for anyone who has traversed the landscape of authentic solitude and emerged with deeper understanding. You don't return to the ordinary world unchanged. You return as someone who can live fully in that world without being unconsciously driven by its compulsions and fears. This is perhaps the most sophisticated achievement of human development, to be completely present in life while remaining inwardly free from the need for life to be anything other than what it is. The solitude that once felt like separation reveals itself to have been preparation, a necessary withdrawal from the collective dream in order to wake up to your own unique expression of universal patterns. You discover that you weren't rejecting humanity by stepping away from unconscious participation in human drama. You were preparing to offer humanity something far more valuable than another person going through the motions of conventional living. You were becoming someone capable of authentic presence, genuine relationship, and what Campbell called transparent to transcendence. Living this way requires a delicate balance that few understand. You must be fully engaged with the practical demands of existence while remaining unattached to the outcomes that drive most people to anxiety and ambition. You participate in relationships, work, creative projects, and all the activities that give life meaning, but you do so from a centered place that doesn't depend on external validation or approval. This isn't emotional numbness or spiritual bypassing. It's the kind of freedom that comes from having met yourself so completely that you no longer need others to tell you who you are. The sacred loneliness that once felt like a burden transforms into a source of strength. You're comfortable with silence because you've discovered that it's actually fullness rather than emptiness. You're at peace with being misunderstood because you no longer depend on others' understanding to confirm your reality. Most importantly, you've learned to distinguish between isolation, which is a withdrawal from life, and solitude, which is a deeper engagement with life from an authentic center. This is what Campbell meant when he wrote about the hero bringing the elixir back to the community. You don't necessarily become a teacher or leader in any conventional sense, but your very way of being becomes a kind of teaching. Your presence demonstrates that it's possible to live without being driven by the unconscious compulsions that create so much suffering. Your relationships model what becomes possible when two people meet beyond their conditioning. Your work, whatever it is, carries the quality of someone who is expressing their authentic nature, rather than just trying to survive or succeed. The journey that began with awakening to the mechanical nature of ordinary life completes itself with the integration of depth and surface, transcendence and engagement, solitude and relationship. You walk alone, yes, but not as someone separate from life, as someone who has found their unique way of being completely alive. This is the sacred loneliness of the awakened soul, not the absence of connection, but the presence of connection so authentic that it transforms everything it touches.